A former Swiss guard has finally broken his silence, and what he's revealing about Pope Francis is something the world never saw coming. Why did he choose to speak now? And what do his words reveal about the final days of one of the most remarkable popes in modern history? Join us as we dive into the hidden world behind Vatican walls and uncover the truth. The life of Pope Francis. Pope Francis was born as Jorge Mario Bergoglio on December 17, 1936, in Buenos Aires, Argentina. He grew up in a modest home with his parents and 4 siblings. His father was an Italian immigrant who worked as a railway worker, and his mother stayed at home to take care of the family. From an early age, Jorge was known for being quiet, thoughtful, and deeply religious. As a young man, Jorge studied chemistry and even worked as a chemical technician for a short time. But his life took a turn when he decided to join the Society of Jesus, a Catholic religious order more commonly known as the Jesuits. The Jesuits are known for their focus on education, social justice, and missionary work. Jorge was drawn to their deep commitment to serving others, especially the poor and those who are often forgotten. He was ordained as a Jesuit priest in 1969, and he quickly became known for his intelligence, humility, and leadership skills. Over the years, he took on more responsibilities within the Jesuit community in Argentina. He eventually became the provincial superior of the Jesuits in Argentina, a role in which he led the order during a difficult time in the country's history. Argentina was going through political unrest, and Jorge was known for helping those in need while quietly opposing violence and injustice. In 1992, he was appointed as an auxiliary bishop of Buenos Aires. Later, in 1998, he became the Archbishop of Buenos Aires. In this role, he lived simply and spent time walking through poor neighborhoods, visiting people in hospitals and prisons, and advocating for the marginalized. He was well known for using public transportation, cooking his own meals, and living in a small apartment rather than the official archbishop's residence. His reputation for humility and compassion reached far beyond Argentina. In 2001, he was made a cardinal by Pope John Paul II, giving him a voice in important matters of the global Catholic Church. As a cardinal, he remained focused on the poor and continued to live simply, avoiding the privileges and attention that often come with the position. Then came a surprising moment in church history. In February 2013, Pope Benedict XVI resigned, becoming the first pope to do so in nearly 600 years. This decision led to a conclave, a private gathering of cardinals to choose the next pope. After 2 days of voting, on March 13, 2013, Cardinal Bergoglio was elected the 266th Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. This was an unconventional beginning in many ways. For one, Pope Francis was the first pope from Latin America. He was also the first non-European pope in more than 1,000 years, a major moment for a church that was becoming increasingly global. His election symbolized a shift toward a more inclusive, diverse, and people-centered church. From the very start, Pope Francis began breaking traditions. He chose the name Francis, becoming the first pope to do so. This was a clear message. He named himself after Saint Francis of Assisi, a 13th century saint known for his love of the poor, his care for the environment, and his simple lifestyle. By choosing this name, the new pope showed what kind of leader he wanted to be: humble, compassionate, and close to the people. Francis was also the first Jesuit pope in history. The Jesuits are known for being thoughtful, disciplined, and focused on education and service. As a Jesuit, Pope Francis brought these values into his role as the leader of the Church. He believed that being a pope was not about power or luxury. It was about serving others, especially those who are suffering. From the beginning of his papacy, he showed a deep commitment to poverty, humility, and accessibility. He chose not to live in the grand papal apartments, but stayed in a small guest house called Casa Santa Marta. He refused to wear lavish robes and golden accessories, choosing simpler garments instead. He washed the feet of prisoners, embraced the sick, and often spoke out for refugees, migrants, and the poor. He also made an effort to be present and approachable. He spoke in a way that was easy to understand. He used stories from everyday life and avoided complicated theological language. He wanted people of all backgrounds to feel welcome in the church. Whether he was addressing world leaders or visiting a slum, his message was always centered on love, mercy, and inclusion. More than a decade later, it's clear that his papacy changed how millions of people see the Catholic Church. Pope of the People and Controversies. During his time as Pope, Francis focused on big, meaningful issues that affected people's everyday lives. He wasn't just concerned with what happened inside churches, he wanted the Catholic Church to play an active role in making the world a better place. From helping the poor to protecting the planet, Pope Francis worked to lead with compassion and courage. One of the most important parts of his papacy was his deep concern for social justice and the poor. Pope Francis believed that the Church should always stand with those who are struggling. He constantly reminded Catholics to care for the hungry, the homeless, and the forgotten. He often said that the Church must be a poor church for the poor. He criticized greed, selfishness, and the gap between the rich and the poor. He also spoke out against what he called a throwaway culture, where people and resources are treated as disposable. Pope Francis also played an active role in interfaith dialogue and peace diplomacy. He believed that people of all religions should work together, especially in a world filled with violence and division. One major example of this was his involvement in the peace talks between the United States and Cuba in 2014. His behind-the-scenes efforts helped the two countries restore diplomatic relations after decades of hostility. He was also involved in supporting the peace process in Colombia, helping to bring an end to more than 50 years of conflict. These efforts showed his commitment to building peace through quiet diplomacy and cooperation, rather than public statements alone. Another major focus of Pope Francis's leadership was the environment. In 2015, he published an important letter called an encyclical titled Laudato Si. In it, he spoke about the need to protect the earth. He called attention to climate change, pollution, and the destruction of nature. He said that caring for creation was a moral responsibility, not just a scientific or political issue. He asked people of all faiths, not just Catholics, to work together to protect the planet for future generations. This was the first time a pope had spoken so strongly about the environment. He also took on the difficult task of cleaning up Vatican finances. For years, there had been reports of corruption, misuse of money, and a lack of transparency inside the Vatican. Pope Francis created new rules to monitor spending, hired outside experts to audit accounts, and worked to bring greater financial discipline to the Church. He made it clear that dishonesty and waste were not acceptable, especially when church funds are meant to serve the poor and support important missions. Pope Francis also worked to deal with one of the most painful issues facing the Catholic Church: abuse by clergy. While this crisis began before his time, he took several important steps to make things better. He spoke out clearly and firmly, calling a crime and a sin. He set up new systems to investigate abuse cases more quickly and hold bishops accountable if they failed to act. He met with victims, apologized for the Church's failures, and tried to create a safer future. Critics said the Church still had more to do, but many agreed that Francis pushed the Church further than it had gone before. Finally, Pope Francis worked to include more people in the Church's decision-making. He supported the greater inclusion of lay people, especially women, in important roles. He appointed several women to leadership positions inside the Vatican, something that had rarely happened before. He also spoke about the need for more respect and opportunities for women. Though he did not support women becoming priests, still, his actions marked a shift toward broader participation in church life. Pope Francis was admired by many, but his leadership also brought controversy. Some traditionalists within the Church felt he was changing too much, too fast. They were uncomfortable with his openness to people who had been pushed aside by the Church in the past, like divorced Catholics or members of the LGBTQ+ community. These critics wanted a stricter, more rule-based approach to faith. At the same time, some people who liked his friendly style expected him to change more doctrines, but he didn't. On many moral and theological issues, Pope Francis remained conservative. This created confusion. Was he a progressive or a traditionalist? The truth is, he was a mix of both. He spoke in a warm, open way, but he held firm beliefs about certain teachings. This balance between tone and doctrine was often misunderstood. That's why some called him a revolutionary, while others saw him as a careful defender of tradition. In reality, Francis tried to move the Church forward without breaking its roots. He wanted to make people feel welcomed without changing the core of Catholic faith. It was a hard path to walk, and it made his papacy one of the most complex in modern history. Up next, we'll look at the quiet soldiers who stood closest to him every day, the Swiss Guard. Warriors of the Vatican. The Pontifical Swiss Guard is one of the oldest military units in the world that is still active today. It was officially established on January 22, 1506, by Pope Julius II. That was the day when 150 Swiss soldiers arrived in Rome to serve as the personal bodyguards of the Pope. These men had walked all the way from Switzerland, carrying their weapons and wearing simple uniforms. They entered the Vatican and were blessed by the Pope himself. At that time, the Vatican faced many political threats. Italy was not yet a united country, and the Pope had both religious and political power. The Pope needed loyal and skilled guards who could be trusted with his life. The Swiss soldiers were known across Europe for their bravery, discipline, and strong Catholic faith. Hiring Swiss mercenaries was common among European rulers during that time, but Pope Julius II wanted them permanently. Since then, the Swiss Guard has remained loyal to the Vatican for more than 500 years. They have protected over 40 popes through wars, reforms, and major changes in the world. Their most famous moment came during the sack of Rome in 1527, when soldiers of the Holy Roman Empire attacked the city. On that day, 147 Swiss guards died defending Pope Clement VII, helping him escape to safety. That act of courage is still remembered every year in the Vatican. The Swiss Guard represents not just military history, but also a deep connection between Switzerland and the Catholic Church. Their continued presence today reminds us of that long tradition of service, loyalty, and sacrifice. Becoming a Swiss Guard is not easy. Not just anyone can apply. There are several strict requirements to qualify. First, all recruits must be Swiss citizens. This tradition goes back to their origin as soldiers from the Swiss Confederation. Candidates must also be Roman Catholic, and they must also have completed basic military training in the Swiss Army. This ensures that every guard is physically fit and has the discipline and skills needed to protect the Pope. There are age and height requirements too. Recruits must be between 19 and 30 years old at the time of admission. They must also be at least 174 centimeters tall. Height matters because of the visual presence they must maintain during formal events. Before they are officially accepted, all new guards must take a sacred oath of loyalty. This ceremony usually takes place on May 6th each year to honor the memory of the 147 guards who died in 1527. During the ceremony, the recruits raise their right hand, swear to defend the Pope, even if it costs them their lives, and touch the Swiss Guard flag. Their uniforms are another symbol of their proud tradition. The guards wear bright, Renaissance-style uniforms that are often mistaken for costumes. These outfits are blue, red, orange, and yellow, colors said to be inspired by the Medici family. The uniforms are tailored by hand in the Vatican, using traditional patterns and careful craftsmanship. Although they may look ceremonial, the guards also carry modern weapons and wear practical clothing when needed, especially when working in plainclothes roles or on more serious security missions. While their appearance might seem historic, the Swiss Guard is a modern and professional force. Every guard receives continuous training in combat tactics, firearms, and security operations. Their training prepares them for threats that may arise in the complex and sometimes dangerous world of international diplomacy, religious gatherings, and public events. The quiet intimacy with the Pope. People often think of the Swiss Guard as just a ceremonial unit, But their role is much more important and hands-on. They are the Pope's personal bodyguards, and they are directly responsible for keeping him safe at all times. On a regular day, the Swiss guards are posted at various entrances to Vatican City, papal residences, and meeting halls. They control access, watch for any threats, and help with crowd control during major events. During public appearances, like the Pope's weekly audience or Sunday blessings, the guards keep a close eye on the crowd while also blending into the background. When the Pope travels abroad, members of the Swiss Guard go with him. These missions require high levels of security planning and cooperation with local authorities. Even though other security forces like the Vatican Gendarmerie and Italian police assist in broader operations, the Swiss Guard always stays close to the Pope. Another part of their job is discretion. Swiss guards are expected to maintain strict confidentiality. They often witness private moments, conversations, meetings, and even moments of prayer or vulnerability. Because of this, they are sworn to secrecy, even after they leave the Guard. This culture of silence has been passed down for centuries. It ensures that the Pope can trust the men who stand just outside his door. Though they might not speak openly, their presence is powerful. Their uniformed figure at the Vatican gate is more than just a symbol. It shows respect, tradition, and a constant watchfulness that never sleeps. Among all Vatican staff, few people are as close to the Pope as the Swiss guards. They see him in ways the public never will. While cardinals and bishops may meet with the Pope during formal meetings, the guards stand just steps away every single day. They witness his routine, his habits, and his personal expressions, the small things that never make headlines. This closeness creates a quiet bond, built not through conversation, but through presence. Guards see the Pope when he leaves early in the morning or returns late at night. They see him when he prays, when he greets guests, when he's joyful, and even when he's tired or ill. These moments are not shared with the world, but they live in the memory of those who served. In the case of Pope Francis, many former guards have spoken of his personal warmth. Unlike past popes who lived in the Grand Apostolic Palace, Francis chose to live in the Casa Santa Marta guest house, a decision that brought him even closer to the guards stationed outside his door. He would often stop to talk, share a joke, or offer a kind word. One former guard said that Francis treated them like members of his family. The final days of Pope Francis. Pope Francis had dealt with health issues before, but the final chapter of his life began in early February 2025, when the Vatican announced he was suffering from bronchitis. At first, it seemed manageable. He canceled a few public events and stayed indoors, following doctor's orders. However, his condition began to worsen quickly. On February 14th, Pope Francis was admitted to a hospital in Rome. Doctors discovered that he had bilateral pneumonia, which means both of his lungs were infected. This is a serious illness at any age, but especially at 88 years old. The Vatican gave daily updates, but many were worried. Reports mentioned that the Pope was having trouble breathing, and that he was also experiencing bronchospasms, which are like asthma attacks. Doctors had to perform bronchoscopies to clear his airways. His situation became very serious by the end of February. On February 28th, doctors said he had endured his worst night in the hospital. That evening, he experienced acute respiratory insufficiency, meaning his lungs couldn't supply enough oxygen to his body. There was even discussion among medical staff about whether they should stop treatment and let him pass away peacefully. However, they continued to care for him, and slowly, he began to improve. During his hospital stay, doctors also discovered a polymicrobial infection, which means more than one type of bacteria was affecting him. This made treatment more difficult. On top of that, the Pope showed signs of mild renal insufficiency, meaning his kidneys were starting to struggle. After 38 days in the hospital, Pope Francis was released on March 23rd. He returned to the Casa Santa Marta, the Vatican guest house where he had lived since becoming Pope. Many believed he was recovering. He even made a short appearance at the hospital before leaving, offering a blessing to about 3,000 people who had gathered to see him. Still, those close to him knew that his energy was limited. He rested through Holy Week, but chose to appear one last time on Easter Sunday, April 20th. He addressed thousands of faithful in St. Peter's Square. Sitting in his Pope-mobile, he smiled and waved as the crowd cheered, calling out, "Viva il Papa!" Though he looked frail, he seemed peaceful. Many later described it as his farewell to the world. The next morning, on Easter Monday, the Vatican released a short but emotional statement. Pope Francis had died at 7:35 a.m. local time. The announcement came just hours after he had been seen alive and alert on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica the day before. The news spread quickly, shocking many, even though he had been ill for months. Cardinal Kevin Farrell, a close advisor to the Pope and a senior figure within the Vatican, made the official announcement to Vatican News. He spoke with calm and sadness, confirming that the Pope had passed away peacefully in his private residence. It was not yet clear what exactly caused his death, but many believe it was the result of complications from the pneumonia and his weakened condition following the long illness. World leaders, bishops, priests, and Catholics around the globe began to send tributes. Flags in the Vatican were lowered. Churches across Europe rang bells in mourning. Messages of sympathy came from presidents, kings, and spiritual leaders of all faiths. People remembered him as a pope of the people, a man who walked with the poor and spoke openly about the challenges facing the world. Inside the Vatican, staff began to prepare for a traditional period of mourning. The papal apartment was sealed, and the body of Pope Francis was prepared for viewing. Details of his funeral would be announced in the coming days, with the College of Cardinals soon to gather to begin the process of choosing the next pope. The fact that Pope Francis died on Easter Monday was deeply moving for many. Easter is the most important celebration in Christianity. It marks the resurrection of Jesus Christ, the promise of new life, and the victory over death. To die the day after Easter, after greeting thousands on Easter Sunday, was seen by many as a final message from the Pope himself. Throughout his life and papacy, Pope Francis spoke often about hope, humility, and sacrifice. He focused on the poor and the forgotten. He urged people to care for the planet, to welcome migrants, and to love each other. His death, coming just after celebrating Christ's resurrection, seemed to reflect the values he lived by: faith, service, and quiet strength. Even in his final days, he kept working. Despite pain and illness, he wanted to be present for the faithful. His last public appearance wasn't about words, it was about showing up. That moment, brief and silent, reminded people of how deeply he cared. His passing on Easter Monday will likely be remembered as a spiritual and symbolic moment for years to come. It marked the end of a powerful papacy and the beginning of a reflection on everything he stood for. The Catholic Church now faces a period of transition, but the memory of Pope Francis will continue to guide conversations about faith, leadership, and what it means to serve. Next, we'll hear directly from someone who stood closest to him in those final years, a former Swiss guard who now breaks his silence. Former Swiss guard breaks silence. For years, the members of the Swiss Guard rarely shared personal stories about their time serving the Pope. It's part of their duty to remain discreet. But after the passing of Pope Francis, one former guard, Didier Grandjean, decided to speak out. Grandjean served as a Swiss guard at the Vatican, standing watch at some of the most sacred and private moments in the Church. After completing his service, he entered the seminary to become a priest. Though his role changed, his connection to Pope Francis did not. He saw the Pope regularly, both during and after his time in the Guard. In his recent statements, Grandjean described a deep personal bond with Francis. He remembered how the Pope would stop and talk with the guards, not just a polite hello, but real conversations. Francis was warm and kind, and even joked with them. He took time to ask about their lives, their families, and their hopes for the future. Grandjean pointed out how different this was from the norm. During the time of Pope Benedict XVI, interactions with the guards were more formal and less frequent. Francis, on the other hand, was present. He made himself available and human, showing real interest in the people who protected him. Grandjean said that Francis made the guards feel seen, respected, and appreciated. According to Grandjean, Pope Francis once told them, "You are my family." For a Swiss guard, this wasn't just a touching remark. It was something deeply meaningful. Many of them are young men far from home, serving in a strict environment. Francis's warmth helped build a sense of comfort and belonging that few popes had ever offered. One of the things that truly set Francis apart was where he chose to live. Instead of moving into the Grand Apostolic Palace, like popes before him, Francis chose to live in Casa Santa Marta, a guest house on Vatican grounds. This decision shocked many in the church, but for those working close to him, it made all the difference. By living at Casa Santa Marta, Francis became more accessible. The Swiss guards who served at that residence saw him every day. He would greet them on his way to Mass, stop to chat, or simply smile as he passed by. These small moments added up. It showed that the Pope didn't want to live above others, but among them. Guards were no longer just ceremonial figures to him. They were young men with stories and struggles, and he acknowledged that. According to Grandjean, this was unusual. In the past, guards were respected but rarely spoken to unless there was a formal need. Francis changed that. He made time for them, and in doing so, changed how they saw their own role. Many guards began to feel that they were not just standing watch, but participating in something greater, walking alongside a leader who valued them as people, not just as protectors. The stories shared by Grandjean reveal a pope who lowered walls, not just between church and world, but also between leaders and those who served them. That closeness created a lasting impression. Didier Grandjean spoke with great care about how Pope Francis led. He described him as a friend of the poor, but also someone with firm convictions. From the outside, many people saw Francis as gentle and soft-spoken, but those close to him knew that beneath the calm surface, he was strong and determined. He was not afraid to challenge systems that needed change. Inside the Vatican, he pushed for reforms in finances, leadership, and culture. He brought in new voices, including more women in positions of power, which had never happened before on this scale. He brought a new tone to the papacy, humble, human, and honest. Many around him, including the guards, noticed this shift. It wasn't just in words, but in the way he lived his life. From choosing a simple residence to making time for those around him, he led by example. Pope Francis, to the Swiss guards, was not just a leader, he was family. If you found this story powerful, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives like this, and don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next.